Chag Sameach. Seder is full of fascinating rituals, family traditions, and preserved Jewish identities which seem to just come alive again, as if they had been frozen in time and then are suddenly reanimated at full force for exactly 2 nights every spring. Growing up in Denver, my family made pickles around the high holidays. We had bathtubs filled to the brim with cucumbers so that they were ready for Passover. And opening that first jar, that blast of brine and taste testing it, is etched into my mind as a quintessential Passover moment. As, of course, are the nights of the Seder themselves, the little finger puppets that my father pulled out every single year, each identical and still covered with the scrawls of crayon I'd put on them as a child, small plastic frogs that we would hide throughout the house and have to find at the same time as the afikomen, and they were usually hidden in the exact same spot every year. And of course, the ever-expanding piles of matzah boxes in all flavors and in all varieties, and egg matzah was always the first one, which ran empty. In my own home, along with my wife, Taylor, we have enshrined a Sephardic tradition from her side of the family that is just tinged a little bit with my unique sense of humor. During the singing of Dayenu, it is traditional in Sephardic households for the various people who are singing around the table to gently hit each other with long, thin, green scallions, representing the whips of the Egyptians. And we always explain the tradition as we get to that part of the Seder. And as I pass out the scallions, I always have one too few. Oh no, I say, wait 2 seconds, I'll go get one more from the fridge. And when I return, I'm holding a leek as wide as my arm. Okay, let's sing. It gets a laugh, which is why we do it, even from those who already know that it's coming. And perhaps ironically, it's these very traditions which must be done every single year. They might actually be at odds with what the rabbis tell us should be the very nature of the Seder. Seder is a place for sanctified ritual. Seder means order, after all. But it is also a place for spontaneous creativity and improvisation. Of course, there are rituals that need to be done, always done, every night, the same way. We sing about them. We'll sing about them again tonight. Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, etc., etc. And of course, there are the family rituals which must be done every single year, or it won't feel like Passover. Who hasn't gone at some point in your life to someone else's Seder, at someone else's home, and on the way back said, well, that was lovely, but it was missing the X, Y, Z of my own family, of my own tradition, my own home. And yet, as much as we prize tradition, even 1,500 years ago, the rabbis of the Talmud were discussing situations where suddenly fully reciting the Haggadah was no longer required. Not because these sections weren't beautiful, not because they weren't meaningful, not because they were irrelevant, but because a spontaneous act of learning had occurred, and as a result, your entire table was allowed to skip ahead in the Haggadah because one person had already learned the very important lesson that it was trying to teach. In the Talmud, in Pesachim 115b, Rav Shimi bar Abba has a tradition that each and every guest at his Seder should have a small, personal table to eat from, like a TV table, or the table that you get on a plane or a train. And he said, during Seder, before you get to the meal, suddenly just get up and go to the person who's in the middle of reading the Haggadah and grab their table and take it away. What? Take the table? Why would you take the table? And Rabbi, who has been to Rav Shimi's Seder as a child, answers the question saying, so that our children will get up and say, why? So that our children, without being prompted, will say something that sounds anything like the following: well, that was unusual, or why did you do that, or do we normally do that? Or as one might say in the Hebrew, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot. What made that different? What made tonight different from every other night? What Rabbi is arguing here is that whenever any child says the essence of those words, however they say those words, that the gathered assembly is no longer obligated to hear the 4 questions at all, because the essence of the moment has already been fulfilled. So for the kids who are here today, keep that in mind when you get to Seder tonight. My teacher, Rabbi Daniel Landis, formerly the Rosh Yeshiva of Pardes and a contributor to the great series of books, My People's Prayer Book, or My People's Haggadah, dives deep into this issue. And as he says, we've learned that there are those who believe that even if you manipulate the question, even if you prompt the question, such as taking away the table, any expression of surprise, any curiosity of questioning annuls the need for the 4 questions at all, because intention is everything. That's one perspective. But there are others, such as the Tosafot, who disagree and say, no. The surprise of the child actually must lead to the very words, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot, because the ritual is itself important, just as important as the intention behind it. And so, having identified these 2 great pillars of opinion, Rav Landis disregards them both. Or perhaps he synthesizes them. And he offers up the following, saying, I suggest another answer, that the child should ask her or his own questions, because the genuineness of questions should always be prized. And the leader should then read the formal questions and teach the child the types of queries that she or he may one day take on. And this is the essence of Seder altogether, eliciting from children a genuine question and also teaching them how to probe further. The Seder, according to Rav Landis, should solicit genuine wonder in the eyes of children. And that wonder should be a spark of something pivotal, exciting, a flurry of bewilderment and dazzle. And it is an opportunity for parents to teach their children, to teach them both our traditions and our lore, and to imbue in them that very Jewish skill of learning to ask questions. And that is perhaps the grand secret of this section of the Haggadah. The entirety of the creative enterprise around the Magid is an attempt to make our children sit up, take note, ask questions. It's an attempt to build curiosity. But why? Why should we guard and value curiosity so deeply? The Talmud obviously has a deep and abiding love of curiosity. And in fact, the Talmud's insistence on curiosity goes beyond simply raising precocious children or the value of an educational experience. Curiosity should be for everyone. The Talmud goes on and says, the child asks. And if the child is not capable of asking, well, then the parent teaches the child the questions. And if physically the child cannot ask because perhaps the child cannot speak, or maybe there is no child, then get your spouse to ask you. And if you have no spouse, then ask yourself. And even if 2 great scholars, the two greatest scholars of your age, who are masters of this material and can recite the entire Torah from memory, if it's these two people and only them who are having dinner with each other, and there's no way to tell the difference between them of who should be the master and who should be the student, well, then they should take turns asking each other. We know that curiosity is of vital importance, but I'll ask it again one more time. Why? Why is curiosity important to Judaism? And all the more so to Passover. Because from curiosity we gain perspective. Curiosity grants us perspective. Literally, we see ourselves suddenly in the story of our ancestors. And this is vital. It is required, in fact, for each of us to see ourselves as if we too had gone forth from Egypt. But I would take us one step further. That from the perspective of enslavement and redemption and faith, when you see yourself as having once been oppressed and now being free, you should gain the very essence of the Passover story. And the fundamental essence of Passover is empathy. Empathy. Empathy lives at the heart of the redemption from Egypt. Empathy is the core of the Passover experience. What is the most common phrase in all of the Torah? Repeated again and again: you will not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Empathy for the other, the ability to see your own suffering not as a historic event, not as a moment that you overcame, but rather to see suffering as a constant ethical call, to be moral, to be vocal, to defend the weak, and to never be the cause of someone else's misery, for no one should ever experience what you as a people experienced. That is the essence of Torah, and that is the essence of Passover. We build empathy from ritual and from practice. Because if you've ever put a tzedakah box on the table and then said, we must put coins in this box and we must make a donation to those in need, then you have had a ritual that built empathy in your life. If your family, like so many here at Holy Blossom Temple, has come for 20 plus years to serve the homeless and the hungry out of the cold, then you have been taking part in a ritual that built empathy. And if during this season of Passover, when our rituals are so alive, if there is something that you are thinking of right now, something that happens in your home with your loved ones, which you do to make the world a better place, then empathy has blossomed in you and it has come out of tradition. And empathy is also found in the sudden, creative, experiential moment which fills our lives. A journey to some other place that is not our home, which opened our eyes to the blessing that we have. When it inspires us to be more generous and more considerate, we've gained empathy. When an unexpected encounter with someone whose life experience is fundamentally different than our own and makes us reevaluate our choices, we gain empathy. And of course, the moment when we see someone else and we see ourselves in them. If you have ever had a meaningful, unexpected conversation with another human being who came from another background, and yet at the end of it you said, I can't believe how much we have in common, then empathy has blossomed for you out of spontaneous creativity. Seder builds our empathy for the world through ritualized moments, through through ancient preserved stories of our people, we don't say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat," because we're being selfish. Empathy drives us and gives us a holiday that gazes outwards. And Seder builds empathy through generational acts of recontextualization that we perform in every generation as we make this tradition our own all over again through the rituals that make us say, what does it mean to be free? When we look at our Seder with our parents and our grandparents, with our brothers and our sisters, our siblings and our cousins, and we make it ourselves all over again, we build empathy. And the Seder builds our empathy through the unexpected as well. Through the unexpected guest, through the opened door, through the things that don't go right, and through the table that suddenly gets removed, so that on a night when tradition is so alive and so heavy in our hands, we might suddenly ask ourselves new questions and see ourselves in the story all over again, fully renewed and dedicated to the cause of freedom and redemption, liberation. Another time, I'll tell you the longer story. But nearly a decade ago, I was privileged to spend the most memorable Passover of my life at Rav Landis's table, the same rabbi who I quoted throughout this morning. And he said to me, "You know, we don't start until 9 p.m. And I nodded because he was the rabbi. And then he said, "And we go until dawn." And I gulped and I nodded because he was the rabbi. And he grinned at me and he said, "And we'll probably only eat around 1 a.m. And that was the straw. I said, "Rabbi, why do you eat so late?" And he hugged me and he said, "Now you're asking the right questions." Good Yontif, Chag Sameach. May it be a blessed and beautiful Passover for us all. At this season of joy and this season of dew, we bless the transformation of the seasons. We are on page 332.